Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Developing a Research Question lecture. This PowerPoint is going to discuss what makes a good research question and how to form one for guiding your paper. So what do we expect from a research question? One thing to keep in mind is that when you are conducting the sort of research that we are going to be doing, you may not find a precise answer. And that is okay because we're not trying to have an argument where we're trying to prove a point. What we're trying to do is investigate an idea and use evidence to tell us whether or not this idea is feasible or not. So in order to do that, we need to have a good question that our research can be centered around. So what makes a good question? Well, for starters, your question should avoid yes or no answer or a two-sided dynamic. So if somebody could easily pick a side and say yes or no, then that's not a good research question. An example of this would be, should people stop smoking and drinking? I mean, the short answer is yes, because we know that the effects of smoking and drinking can be bad for our bodies. The long answer is, well, it depends, right? It depends how frequently you do it. It depends on people's genetics. For example, I knew a woman that died in her 90s and she didn't go a day without smoking a pack of cigarettes. Whereas my mom, who never smoked a pack of cigarettes in her life, died in her 70s. So there's a lot of factors that go into smoking and drinking, but there's simply putting it like this, yeah, probably not the best habits to engage in, but again, there are things that depend, right? So with this question, should people stop smoking and drinking, what we've done is we've created a yes or no argument, and this is what we want to avoid. Because there's not a lot of active pursuit of research in this question, I think that on the surface you can find plenty of research that will tell you that smoking and drinking is bad for your bodies. Another thing besides avoiding a yes or no question or a two-sided dynamic is it should avoid leading the reader. So leading the reader is something we see fairly often. This is when somebody sets up a question that you are supposed to just go along with and agree with. So it's set up in such a way that they want you to agree to an obvious answer that they're going towards. In this example, we have, if people smoke and drink, are they likely to die young? Okay, good question. I think that a lot of the data shows that people that smoke and drink, they have problems with their lungs, they have problems with their livers, they can also have problems with their kidneys, and so it sets up health problems, say in their 50s or early 60s, that they may not experience naturally until they're in their 70s or 80s. So it can cut off a decade or two of life or problems for them. So what's wrong with this? Well, we're trying to lead the reader in a certain direction. Also, it's likely that you already know the answer to this. So we don't want a research question that can on the surface be answered by people, because that's not research. And then, are you likely to find evidence that supports this generalization? Yes. I think if you search for medical journals, do a search through there, that you would find plenty of evidence that would support this research question. So we're not really conducting research here. What about this example here? Why do some people smoke and drink while others never do? Interesting. Is this a yes or no question? Absolutely not. This question is open-ended. which means there's not some sort of foregone conclusion. It doesn't lead the reader to an answer. It's actually fairly engaging because why do some people while others never do? That's interesting because it allows you to look into different areas of research. So it could be a cultural thing, it could be a geographical thing, it could be a thing where it has to do with the particular family, a one or two parent household, etc. And also, these answers could be significant to a specific audience. This is a good research question. I would call this one good. But we still have some problems with it. So you'll see that people is highlighted up here in the sentence. Why do some people drink while others never do? The problem with that is that the word people needs to be more clearly defined. People is everybody on the planet. That's a lot of people. So are we talking about young people, old people, certain nationalities? That would help us narrow the topic a little bit. So another thing to ask ourselves is, do we have the space and energy to cover both smoking and drinking? Well, probably not. So I would say we need to narrow this down. If you're doing like a 10-page research, even a 20-page research essay, you don't have the room or the time to do that much research. So I would say pick one, smoking or drinking, and then expand on that through your research essay. So for example, we could say, why do some undergraduate college students smoke while others never do? So this new question, we have done two things. We've dropped the drinking entirely, so that's gone. And we have narrowed who people are. So we're going to focus on undergraduate college students. And as we see here, there's a lot of green bullet points instead of a lot of red. So it's not oversimplified. It's not a yes or no question. Evidence can be found in a variety of journals that study fields of interest, so medical, social, science, etc. And there should be published research regarding these topics. It's an interesting and relevant question, and it's manageable. So this could be discussed in a single essay given enough pages. And also, most importantly, I don't think you, the writer, if you were the writer, you would have a preconceived notion of what you're going to find out. You don't really know the answer to this question. So that means that you are going to learn something new in the process of discussing this research question. And that is what analytical research is all about. That's exactly what you want to do. So let's sum it up. What makes a good research question? Well, a research question is not black and white. So there's going to be areas that you need to investigate, and it's not going to have some foregone conclusion. A good research question should have an unknown outcome. So again, you don't know what you're driving towards. You don't know what you're going to find at the end of your research. It's going to be new to you. So it's going to avoid too local or recent questions. So sometimes we get into topics of like, oh, this just happened a couple months ago, or gosh, this happened at the end of last year. I want to investigate this angle of this topic. Well, if it happened that recently, chances are there hasn't been any research done. And if there is research being done, it probably hasn't been completed yet. So that means you're going to be waiting a while to get published. It can take a year or more for research articles to get published on any given topic. So if it's too local or too recent, chances are you're not going to find research on it. So be careful of that. Okay, things to avoid. Don't be too broad or too narrow. So that's important there, and we kind of went over that in our research question example, right? We had smoking and drinking. That was a little bit too much to talk about, and we had the word people, which was very broad because that meant everybody, but we narrowed that down to undergraduate college students. Now, you don't want to get too narrow, because what if you narrowed it down to undergraduate college students at Sac State? Well, if you're specifically talking about Sac State, you're probably too narrow, because I doubt anybody has really studied that among the Sac State population. Probably you're going to find some research among undergraduate college students, but possibly not Sac State. Maybe Chico State. That's a joke. Anyway, one should ask this question. So if you're doing research, ask yourself the following: can I discuss said concepts adequately in the space that I have? So think about it. You have 4 to 6 pages to fill, double spaced. So that's really 2 to 3 pages of writing and research. Are you able to do that in that much space? Now, if you have an instructor that's more gracious and they give you 10 pages or 15 pages or 20 pages, then your research question can get a little more complicated. But think about the space that you have. So pay attention to your rubric. And then ask yourself, is this such a dense topic that I'm going to have to leave something important out? So are you going to have to drop important things that you find in your research? Will you run out of points to discuss? So perhaps your research question is too narrow. Maybe if it was a 4 to 6 research essay, it would be perfect. But your prompt tells you you have to have 10 pages. And so you're several pages short. That's a problem right there. So think about the amount of space that you have been given that you have to fill, and do you have enough to go off of? And then, of course, does the research question meet the requirements of the assignment? So make sure that your research question follows the prompt and does exactly what the prompt is asking of you. Finally, remember this: we engage in research to find answers, not to enforce ideas or opinions that we already have. So challenge yourself. And this is one reason why I pick colony collapse disorder, because most people have never heard of it, and so they don't have any foregone conclusions about it. I will say, if you do a quick reading, you will find people in searches on the internet like, oh, this is bullshit, it's not actually real, it's not actually happening. But the majority of research over the last 20 years or so says, no, in fact, it is happening. And certainly beekeepers have noticed a change in their own colonies. And we can certainly suspect why it's happening, but research is ongoing. So you have to do a little more than surface level research for this. Really dive deep, get into the literature, and find out what's going on. And that's it for this lecture. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, move on to the rest of the material in this week's folder.